Welcome back to On Record PR. I'm Jennifer Simpson Carr, and I am joined today by our international faculty member, Mark Beese. Hi, Mark.
Hi, Jennifer.
How are you?
Terrific. Thanks for having me.
Of course. So, to our listeners, if you joined us for last week's episode, you know we had a great conversation about the state of the legal industry and why partner development is an imperative. Mark and I talked about the leadership gaps that can go unnoticed or unaddressed until they become an issue. And if you missed it, I highly recommend going back to listen. It sets the stage perfectly for the conversation we are about to have today. Um, Mark, you're back with me today, and we're shifting the perspective to tomorrow's law firm leaders, the current generation that is excited and enthusiastic about stepping into a leadership role, whether it be a partner or a chief of some sort. We see a lot of different paths opening up for practicing attorneys at firms now. Um, so in the last episode, we talked about the pressure that partners face to lead in this VUCA environment. And I'd like to start by asking you what you see in terms of the biggest differences between how law firms have traditionally developed talent, if that was a thing, and what younger generations are looking for today in leadership training and development for their next position at a firm.
Yeah. Big question. We could spend all of our time on that if you want, but traditionally, uh, a, a lot of law firms relied on informal training um, by imitation, and so uh, we call that the water cooler moment, right? So an associate would see a partner at the water cooler and say, "Hey, how'd you do this?" Or the partner would see the associate and say, "Why don't you come in? I got a client call." And this stuff, well, at least we hoped, happened a lot. And so we would hope that our associates were going to learn by osmosis. They learned because they're in the conference room. They learned because it was a after 5 o'clock discussion about a client issue. And we don't really know how effective that was or if it really was happening, right? But the COVID pandemic changed that. We didn't have any more water cooler moments because for 6 months, a year and a half, we were all someplace else. And if there were water cooler moments, it would be a Zoom call like you and I are on, and it'd be a little bit awkward. And professional development folks are saying, that's the biggest loss we have, is that informal training. We have to find ways to replace that somehow. And then some other people have said, I'm not sure it was ever working well in the first place. Because of cultural changes and things like that. So now we're in this hybrid remote world where that water cooler moment's still really challenging. A lot of firms are saying, come back to the office 3 days a week. Wednesdays are a common day, and people, may not be in the other days. And we're bumping into each other a lot less frequently. And so we have to be more intentional about development. And one of the things that we're starting to see is more mid and large size firms doing academies, bringing everybody together by level. I just did a senior level academy for a global firm, 73 lawyers from 4 different continents, and they were here for 4 days. And we had a day and a half of leadership development for them. And the things that we focused on were those skills that related to their jobs at the moment. How do I lead a team? How do I lead a high performance team? How do I give effective feedback? How do I delegate? How do I be an effective follower? And how do I grow effective followers in my team? How do I deal with stress of being stuck in the middle between a senior partner and a middle or junior associate? And I'm kind of running stuff day to day, and I feel squeezed between the two of them. How do I find time for mentoring and checking in and building management and leadership tasks into my daily life? So those are the things that are often popping up. Sometimes we talk about things like communication skills, and we might use an assessment like Myers-Briggs or DISC. One of the great assessments that is out there now is Heidi Gardner's Smarter Collaboration Assessment. And it's a personality assessment. It's a new version, been out for about a year, and it helps people understand what their strengths are in terms of a collaboration. And if you do it as a team, you can see what the team profile looks like and how you might have to adjust working within the team. So in terms of associates or younger partners, those are often the things that we focus on.
So I have so much respect for these personality assessments because one of my firms invested in our team and we did an off day, a 1 day offsite, and it was really fascinating to have the facilitator walk us through our results and in real time see team members turning to one another and saying, that's why our meetings are so difficult, or wow, that's why we work so well together.
Yeah.
So I've seen firsthand how effective those can be. I do want to go back to something you mentioned, use the word academy. And I think this is really interesting because thinking about how sometimes leadership in firms approach training and development, we hear, oh, let's just have a 1 day offsite or let's just have a training. And we're starting to see a shift in that there's a realization that, a 90-minute workshop on its own, or, 1 day offsite can't tackle all of the things that you just mentioned that are so critical in effective leadership. So can you talk to us a little bit about what the shift is from kind of this, let's tackle it all at one time and think that that's going to be effective change to kind of this mindset shift of how do we implement a structure that's actually going to lead to real behavioral change and measurable performance improvements by leaders.
Yeah, well, that's the question of the day, isn't it? What's the ROI on leadership development? Um, um, so in terms of format, um, um, think about some building blocks. One is what we've been talking about, that's interactive experiential training. And so it's not just sinking in information. We can feed information on a web portal or a learning management system. I can give you videos and articles, but that's not going to make you give feedback any better. But if you and I'd say, hey, let's practice giving feedback, and in this SBI format, I'm going to give it to you and you're going to give it to me. And then we're going to meta communicate and talk about how we could do it better. We do it again. That's that's a model I learned when I was teaching at the Center for Creative Leadership. I mean, they'll spend a day and a half doing feedback training, and they put us in a room, and we would give feedback to each other in small groups. They would videotape it and then hash through the videos. It was painful, but it was really effective because you can start seeing, that interactive sort. So you got interactive learning. Coaching is very powerful because everybody's got their own thing. Everybody's got their own situation. Everybody's got their own struggle. And when it comes to things like communication or feedback or delegation, just being able to talk through it with somebody is important. Assessments. There are a lot of assessments like Myers-Briggs and DISC, Strengths Finders, Heidi's Smarter Collaboration. One I like to use a lot is a change style inventory. And they can help us learn about ourselves, but also learn about other people and how we might need to adjust. And then there's also cohort or small group coaching that can be very helpful, or small group coaching along with the project. And so if you start looking at these tools and say, what if we put them all together in a 10-month or a year or 18-month long program where people are learning together and can grow together and they can share some of their insights together. And we can start developing a vocabulary that comes out of some of this training and assessments and coaching. Now we have a real shot at changing behavior. It's not just stuck in the head. It's something that, I tried this, it didn't work. I tried this, and this is a reaction I got. And if you can create an environment where peers help each other, now you're changing culture. And that can be very powerful. I did a program like that for new practice group leaders for a Pacific Northwest firm a couple of years ago. And interesting firm. They're going through a change in leadership. 80% of the new practice group leaders, industry group leaders, were under the age of 50. It was a young group, and like 7 out of 10 were new. And so we did this, and we would have these quarterly cohort meetings. And the first one, I would throw out a question, facilitate a question, silence. One word answers. It's like, this is painful. And they were like, it was almost like a competition about who could outstand the other, and I was like, I was very discouraged as a facilitator. The last one we had, they'd gotten used to talking about what's in front of them and their problems, and offering solutions and insights. And that hour and a half we had went to 2 hours, and went to 2.5 hours. And they said, Mark, this is such an important strategic discussion. We've never had this at this level in this firm. We're going to just skip the rest of the training today, because we're going to work through this, and we're going to break up into small groups, and we're going to solve this problem. And I'm like, we've changed the culture. And so I don't know if that answers your question, but we're starting to see more thoughtful, behavior changing, comprehensive leadership programs, and that's my vision for what best practices in legal.
So there are and you touched on this in our last episode, but there are a lot of models now, work models playing out in firms, right? Common days, hybrid, all in person, all remote, et cetera, et cetera. So what kind of combination or approach tends to work well with these, you know, academies or longer term programs to really make an impact and help drive that connection between the participants?
Oh, I think it's a consultant's answer. It all depends.
Hmm.
Um, there
The
are
legal
some,
answer.
yeah,
It depends.
there are some things that you can do well and you can do virtually. Um, some things that are best done in person, simulations better done in person, practicing leadership skills like giving feedback, or some persuasion skills or communication skills, best practice that in person. Not the only way, but it's best done. But you can have an effective cohort discussion virtually. You can build trust virtually, through hour and a half long Zoom meetings with a cohort. Um, it's hard to get everybody together in a large organization for an hour and a half in person, but you can create very diverse groups virtually,
Mhm.
right? And so one of the joys of my work is I get to work with a couple of international organizations, and we have these cohorts of 10 or 15 people, and we got a couple from Africa, a couple from Asian countries, a couple from Europe, a couple from the States, and we can learn from each other. And that is rich. Not only you start building relationships and learning from each other, but that also helps with collaboration and internal business development, and network sharing and learning best practices. And there's some great things that come from that. So I think it's a balance of
Mhm.
virtual and in person. Um, one of the nice things about these academies when we come together, it's not just training if it's done well, but you can bring in your senior leadership of the firm. And now we have an opportunity for sharing vision and answering questions. We can bring in practice group leaders and talk about how we integrate or cross sell with each other. We can create both formal and informal ways of connecting so people find peers that they can rely on and share information about. We can go a little bit cross generation and start creating opportunities for people to find an informal mentor. And all of those things are just really critical for any organization's sustainable culture.
So, Mark, it's words academy and, a program may seem to our listeners like a big lift, right? Like a really serious investment of time and money and resources. What is one actionable step that our listeners could take to start to build a business case or, talk about this concept internally? Because I can imagine many of our listeners are saying we could really use that, right? They may be in a position where, they're worried about senior associate turnover or, um, they're really one of their goals this year is lateral attorney recruiting and retention. What's one actionable step our listeners could take to start down the path of leadership development and training?
Um, I think there's actually a couple of questions in there, but one of the places to start is to ask the question, what is the cost of doing nothing? What if we did nothing in this area? Would we really be um, uh, having a retention rate the same as we have now? What if something happens in the world and something like a recession and there's pressure and we start looking at things. What's the cost of doing nothing? What's the cost of not having strong leaders? What's the cost in the marketplace? What's the cost in terms of the potential of losing partners and whole practices that to firms that might have stronger leadership or a stronger plan? Um, and the next step is what are the pain points? Um, with leadership development, sometimes people they can't articulate what they don't know, right? Um, but where are we experiencing pain points? Well, let's look to the exit interviews if we're doing those. Let's look at our flash surveys if we're doing those. Let's take a couple associates out for beers and have a conversation and say, what are we doing well? What do we need to start, stop, continue, right? And start aggregating some of that information around what are the pain points, and then say what can we do from a professional development point of view to address those pain points. When firms go through that, they usually start with things like, you know what, we really need to do something around giving feedback because especially associates feel they're not getting enough feedback. So we need to have something of feedback. And senior associates will say things like, I'm delegating now, but nobody ever really delegated well to me. And I haven't the first clue how to do it. And I'm afraid to say bold things to people because I don't want to be seen as pushy or as know-it-all, and so I'm kind of frozen, and so I'll just do it myself. And and eh, so you start going from the pain points to learn, what are the learning topics, and what you'll end up with eventually is what I call leadership competency model. What do we want our leaders to be able to do at different levels in the organization? And then how do we support them through training, coaching, assessments, uh, cohort work, whatever it might be. And that's kind of how you start thinking about it.
The cost of doing nothing is such an incredible answer because I think, again, going back years ago, there wasn't as much of a risk that attorneys would leave. And now we are seeing, particularly you mentioned in the last episode with the executive orders, we've actually seen
Yeah.
how committed attorneys are to the culture and the decisions that their firms make, and how committed they are to not remaining at those firms if they aren't given the support and aren't aligned with decisions and culture and values. So it was a great answer. So I want to thank you again for joining the podcast. It has been a pleasure learning from you. I am thrilled for the opportunity personally to collaborate with you on the faculty. We'd love to have you back again because I think we could share some more stories from trainings and programs together and from our time in house. And I want to thank our listeners for joining us. We create these episodes for you. If you have found them helpful, please subscribe to the show, share an episode that you've enjoyed with a colleague or a friend, consider leaving an iTunes review. All of those things help us continue to produce episodes that provide you with timely insights, news, and strategies that support you day to day. Share your feedback and ideas with us at podcast@onrecordpr.com. Thank you so much again, Mark, and we'll see everybody next week.
Thank you, Jennifer.
This episode is brought to you by Furia Rubel Communications, a public relations and marketing agency serving law firms and businesses worldwide. With an expert team positioned throughout the U.S. and supported by an international faculty, Furia Rubel enhances our clients' brands through integrated communications by providing expert guidance in crisis management and high-profile litigation, protecting brand and reputation, and supporting internal marketing teams. To learn more, visit furiarubel.com. On Record PR is produced by Jennifer Simpson Carr and Matt Henderson, with support from the team at Furia Rubel Communications. This episode is edited by Isabel Horan and Christian Yamula. Visit www.onrecordpr.com for resources and more information.